Go and get that now. Hello, everyone. If you could come into the room, we had people in here and then they've left again. But yeah,
Pessoal, pode voltar pro auditório que a gente vai começar. Quem
Please
tiver
come
aí fora.
back. We will start now. If you're outside, please come back in.
or Ian gets a private show. Oh, they were just there. I mean, should we just start? Should we just start it and then, yeah. Well, so welcome to session 5 of the last day of the Experimental Archaeology Conference. And today's sessions are focusing all on ceramics. So those of you who attended the ceramics workshop will have a lot of insight into this one, hopefully. Today we have 3 sessions. The first one is all online speakers. So thank you very much to our speakers for sending in your presentations and recordings in time. And first we will hear from Maria Cristina Chibunau and Elena Camelia Pintilli. Again, my apologies for all the mispronunciations of your names. I'm doing my best. Who will talk about foreign influence kitchenware or both.
The Cucuten culture, part of the Ariush-Cucuten-Cipilia culture complex 5-4 millennium BC, extended over a territory more than 355 square kilometers across present-day Romania, the Republic of Moldova, and Ukraine. Known for its large settlements and for its painted pottery of high artistic and technical quality, this prehistoric civilization left behind remains that continue to interest specialists and the public. The study of Cucuten culture began with research at the eponymous site of Cucuten Cetățuia, Iași County. Hubert Schmidt excavation on fortified plateau Cetățuie and also in the open settlement in the valley at Dâmbul Morii, Băiceni, laid the basis for its relative chronology. Schmidt defined the Cucuten A and B phases, with AB as transitional, observing stratigraphy and stylistic difference between two locations, which he interpreted as successive settlement stage of the same community. On Cetățuie in phase A, in the valley at Dâmbul Morii in phase AB, and back on Cetățuie in phase B. Besides the painted pottery that has dominated studies of the culture, another distinct ceramics type consistently appear in site assemblies. Type C pottery. From the earliest research, it attracts some interest, being considered by Schmidt a foreign element, possibly an import from northeastern areas characteristic of the end of phase B and primarily using for cooking. The characteristic he noted included a paste temperature with crushed shells and incised or cold-impressed decoration. However, subsequent research has shown that type C pottery is not continued to the final phase B, but appears from the end of phase A and is present through the culture evolution A-B-B. In Romanian archaeological written works, the interpretation as an alien element prevails, whereas in Ukrainian written works, this category is termed kitchenware, implying a clear functional interpretation rather than seeing it strictly as an import or external influence. The technological characteristic of Taisi pottery differentiate it from the fine painted Cucuten ceramics. The most frequently mentioned is the addition of crushed shells, mollusks, and snails, considered crucial for increasing resistance to thermal shocks, an essential property for vessels subject to direct and repeated heating. Alongside this, sand snails, plebs, grift, crushed old pottery sherds, grong, sometimes limestone granules with a similar role to shells, and organic matter, probably straw, chaff, chopped grass, or even animal dung, can be found in the paste. The burning out of this organic matter during firing leaves numerous voids in the ceramic's body, contributing to the high porosity of the vessel. Sometimes the decoration is supplemented by applied clay knobs or pills, typically hemispherical or conical, using placed below the rim either in pairs of irregularity. Firing was carried out at low temperature than those using for fine painted pottery. Estimated suggest a range between 4500 500 Celsius and up to 600 7500 Celsius. The process was often completed or conducted in an uncontrolled atmosphere, reducing or mixed, likely in simple installations such as open heaters or pits, resulting in various color on the surface and in the course of the shades from gray to blackish gray to brown and reddish brown. Potentially secondary firing must also be considered occurring either during the vessel's use or firing or during the frequent house fires, which could alter the pottery's original appearance. To test this hypothesis and clarify the technological and functionality type C pottery, we intended an experimental archaeology project proceed by details and analysis of relevant archaeology material. We selected 25 Type C ceramics from secure context at the eponymous site, 16 from Cucuteni Cetățuie Phase B and 9 from Cucuteni Dâmbul Mori Phase AB. Initially, macroscopic examination confirmed the difference between the two establishments. From fragments from Cetățuie B had porous space with no visible shells and a brownish red color, oxidizing firing, possibly abundant vegetable temper. Those from Dâmbul Mori AB frequently contained visible shells, including and had a darker color, likely different firing condition, possibly reducing at a low temperature. For a more precise characterization, we perform microscopic analysis thin section CMD-ADX on 5 samples, selected 3 from Cetățuie number 8, 12, 20, 2 from Dâmbul Mori number 5, 19. The same analysis provided key data. They confirmed the estimated difference in firing temperature. The Cetățuie B samples appear to have been fired at a temperature 700 800 Celsius, having a more complex matrix structure, whereas Dâmbul Mori AB samples indicated temperature below 700, possibly 65 700, with a less transformed structure. Chemical analysis ADX related large amount of calcium, probably from shells, and carbon of certain origin in some samples, high concentration of potassium, an element that in this context can be associated with the presence of fermented organic matter (DAG) added to the paste. These analytical results, particularly the estimate temperature and clues about organic composition, become the crucial starting point for the replication experiments, allowing us to move behind the limitation of general recipe. The first replication experiments were guided by general information from the specialist written work. As an initial exercise, we used local clay and tested several recipes. Clay plus dry vegetable um, matter, straw, high grass plus sand, clay plus dry vegetable matter plus shell, clay plus dry vegetable matter plus natural sand mixed shells. We observed that the paste with sand quickly lost plasticity and was difficult to model, drying too fast. After fire at 500 Celsius in an electric kiln, non-satisfied reestablished the original, having a different appearance and texture. Second firing at over 900 Celsius, simulating a house fire, did not improve the situation, but did allow us to observe directly how shells fragmentation decompose into powder calcium carbonate at high temperature. In another trial, we replaced the dry vegetable matter with compost dug, adding shells powered in one variant. Modeling was easiest, although the paste was quite sticky. Fire at 4500 Celsius, the broken samples show a somewhat rare internal similarity to the original pore structure, but the external appearance was still different. A final attempt to this phase involved especially replication the shell's rich pottery from the Bulmori, deliberately firing it at a very low temperature, only 400. The resulting vessel, although similarly solid after firing, was extremely fragile and completely disintegrated upon contact with water. This initial failure, through the time consuming, were essential for understanding the limitation of the approach and the need for special analytical data. Using the CM data on temperature and composition, we proceed to adjust the proportion after testing with various proportion. Firing at 7500 Celsius, we identify a recipe that works. Approximately 65% clay plus 30-40% chopped dry vegetable matter. We use lavender straw hemp plus 10-20% crushed shells. Vessel modeling with this paste after drying and firing had a low specific weight and a general appearance much closer to archaeological type C fragments. To test firing under condition, we use this valid recipe to model a large vessel. Indeed, for the functional test, we gradually heated the dry vessel before placing into the hot pit with embers to minimize thermal shock. The firing itself led about an hour, during which the vessel remained covered by embers. The maximum temperature reached in the embers was estimated to be between 65-70 Celsius. The vessel survived the process cracks, without major cracks, and its final color fitted perfectly with the various observations from archaeological type C pottery. Finally, we did a functional test to verify cooking potential and shell's thermoresistance. We conducted a comparative experiment using type C replica vessel and control vessel of the Cucutaneous fine ware type. As both vessels were porous, we applied a traditional method of partial waterproofing by rubbing them inside and out with pork, lard, and gently heating them near the fire to allow the fat to melt and penetrate the pores. This reduced but did not completely eliminate liquid loss. For the cooking test, inspired by archaeobotanical and archaeozoological data from the Moldovan Cucuteni culture, we choose to use wheat groats and piece of pork. We placed equal quantities in both vessels, 5 cups of groats pre-soaked and 2 pieces of pork each. We then added the water in which the groats has been soaked, divided equally, 4 cups of liquid in each vessel. We placed the vessel on an improvised heater, distributing the hot embers around their bases. Attempts to measure the internal temperature with probes provide inconclusive under the conditions, so we monitored the external wall's temperature with a thermometer. The difference in behavior was striking. The fine ware vessel heated up extremely quickly, after only about 10 minutes under the uneven thermal stress to opening fire. Its crack audibly and visibly. The cracks starting from the base extending during cooking, although it did not lead to immediate loss of contents. The food in this vessel began to boil rapidly and violently, leading to significant water loss through evaporation. The preparation was ready quickly, approximately 1 hour, but due to the high temperature and lack of liquid towards the end, some of the groats struck to the vessel walls and partially burnt. The Type C vessel, in contrast, heated up much slowly and gradually. Despite prolonged exposure to the same condition, it surfaced no structural damage through the experiment. Boiling in this vessel was gently, steady simmer, and the preparation required a longer time, approximately 2 hours, but appeared evenly cooked. At the end, only the fine ware vessel showed several structural damage, multiple cracks, rendering it unstable. Type C vessel was intact. In conclusion, our preliminary experiments provide strong arguments that supported the interpretation of Type C pottery as technological adapted for the thermal preparation for food. The fact that this ceramics category is found in almost every dwelling and through the entire evolution of Aquitaine Tripilia culture is an additional argument against interpretation. It is an important or evidence of foreign presence within the settlements. The addition of shell and the purpose structure confer the resistance to thermal shocks and heat management capabilities far superior to those of fine pottery, allowing its use open over open fire for the slow and probably more energy efficient cooking of preparation like stew, soup, or porridge. The different behavior suggests a functional complementary type C vessel for slow, safe cooking, fine ware vessel for short term storage, serving, or other purposes were exposed to different fire was not necessary, was even contradicted. Observation regarding the practical difficulties of modeling the paste in context to the relative easiest of procuring and using dog, often clues about the possible technological choice and contains faced by prehistoric potters indicating true might have been a preferred opinion in certain contexts. However, these results are a starting point for long-term research. It is necessary to continue and diversify the experiments, including repetition for statistical validation, testing multiple variables, and systematically correlating the experimental data with extensive comparative archaeometrical analysis on the archaeological materials to fully elucidate the role and signify of this ceramics category in complex life of the Cucutaen culture communities.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria and Elena. Now we will be hearing from Clarice Bianchetti and Adriano Marcio dos Santos. This one is in Portuguese, so if you need an English
Olá,
translation,
eu me
please use your headphones.
Olá, eu me chamo Clarice Bianchi.
Hello, my name is Clarice Bianchetti. I'm from the University of the State of Amazonas
Campus de Parintins,
in Campus D,
no interior do estado,
Parintins,
e vou
in the
apresentar
hinterlands of the state, and I'm going to present this study which is called Making Ceramics at School, the use of carbonized rice husks as a temper. Also in this study there's a partnership with Professor Adriano Marcio dos Santos, who's also from this university and is a partner in our extension projects and also in our lab work in regards to the replacement and use of tempers. So the project, which is the foundation of this work, is called On the Trail of Archaeological Information. It's an extension project and its goal is to educate people on the heritage of Parintins. And there will be events at schools. These are theoretical events talking about the importance of the material heritage produced by indigenous populations in pre-colonial, before colonial contact, and also the development of practical workshops of shaping ceramics and clay. This project is made up of 5 interventions, 5 meetings, and sometimes there are 6 meetings due to the support we receive from the schools themselves. So I'm going to explain the 5 and why there's this variation, why there's this sixth meeting. The first class we have with students is about legislation and archaeological sites. The second is about archaeological remains using a box that has archaeological remains which come from the Amazon Museum, which were kindly borrowed to the project with authorization from the institution responsible for these items, and students can handle this material with guidance from the team. A third class that doesn't happen always, so that will depend on the partnership with the school. It's a field class on archaeological sites, and when that's possible, if the schools provide the transportation, we will do that. If it's not possible, that won't happen. It will depend on the partnership we have with each individual school. And in the 4th and 5th meeting, that's when we mold the ceramics in a first stage, creating and molding these clay devices. And on the 5th one, on the following day, we polish and we decorate these devices. And finally, we organize an exhibition of these activities at the school, presenting the materials, and then there is an exhibition of the best moments over these 5 or 6 activities. So in the case of the ceramic molding phase, we also need the clay mixed with an anti-plastic, some sort of temper. In the Amazon archaeological, we see several materials that are used as an anti-plastic, as a temper. You have ashes, or caripé ashes, also grinded shells and sand and other materials. But what's most common in the artifacts in the Amazon region are kawishi and caripé, which are present in a larger or smaller amount, but they're almost always present in these materials. So in the material that comes with these slides, you can observe the trunk and leaf of the caripé tree, and you can see the removal of the bark, which is visible on the trunk. You can see that the bark was removed here. You can still see that there's the bark. And in case of kawishi, it's kawishi, which is a river tree. You can see it here. It's a tree that grows by a river or a lake. And then we want to bring your attention to these 2 issues, which are very important in the use of the temper. So why don't we use these tempers, which are more common in archaeological material in the Amazon region in our project? And here is the justification. The caripé trees are threatened in the Parintins region. It's very difficult to find an area that has a significant amount of these trees. This is due to deforestation, the unbridled deforestation in the Amazon due to urbanization, and also the cutting of these trees for burning them and actually grinding them for the use of them as a temper. That also contributes. What's in this bark? There are small silica crystals which, free from this organic material which surrounds them, it's going to be an excellent temper material. The literature is quite precise in this regard. So here in images we're going to have the bark of the caripé
preparada, né, retirada para utilização.
ready for use,
E aqui embaixo
for
uma
burning,
amostra, né,
and
desse
beneath
processo da queima da
a
carne.
small example of the burning of this bark, so that afterwards from these ashes they can be ground
Utilizar como antiplástico.
to be used as a
O
temper.
problema de não utilizar
So the problem
o caripé
of not using caripé,
ser uma
the
árvore
reason it's not used is because it's a threatened species, it's difficult to find, which also would contribute, and as a project
bom tempo de trabalho,
has been ongoing for some time,
também
it would also contribute
dessas espécies vegetais.
for the impact on these
No
species.
caso do cauixi, né,
In the case of kawishi,
outro antiplástico mais
which is the other temper that's
na
the most common temper
cerâmica arqueológica,
in archaeological ceramics,
o que que acontece? O cauixi, ele é uma
the
espécie
situation
de
is
esponja d'água.
Kariche is
E
a
ela cresce presa, né, em arbustos ou rochas na zona
is a spongeous type of plant. It happens in it appears in rivers which don't have much of water flow. The skeleton of these sponges is formed by these spiculas, these needle-like structures. So kawishi, like I showed, they are attached often to trees, to river vegetation, and it also has a significant silica concentration. But there is a certain characteristic that it's a material. It's an irritating material. It can cause you to feel itching, and even after you've burned it, it's still going to maintain this characteristic that can cause rashes and irritation. So the use of this material as a temper for activities with kids is avoided, so that we don't create any harm or we don't inconvenience them. So kawishi, it has this characteristic as well. That's why we don't use it in the temper, even though we've done some testing, and it's an interesting material. The paste is a much better paste for handling, but it has that. We can also see an image of one of these sponges and a small trunk or branch that it was attached to, but here that's before burning, and here is a little fire showing when it's being burnt to prepare the temper, the ground temper for use. So what was the alternative that we found for using it as a temper in these projects in heritage education? It was the use of a carbonized rice husk, and this was because there were several scientific studies that showed it was feasible. So we ended up trying to search a temper that was sustainable and feasible. And for that, we looked at the Andres and Svalken's studies, who suggested that 12% of this material grounded up out of the total of clay would be useful. And here there's a quote that says retraction and burning and the use of 12% of this rice husk of this silica concentration would have the best results amongst the tests he did. And also the porosity and the absorption, which would justify the results in using 12% related to the total amount of clay. And as it's a material that's more used for illustration purposes or pedagogical purposes, we didn't need a material that was excellent or had excellent resistance. Also because the goal was to teach. And the results were quite satisfactory. So we've added these 12% of carbonized rice husk ground up in a total amount of clay, and we have this clay paste that's used for shaping. Since the tests that were done in 2022, the second semester 2022, and after the university extension and continue with the University Extension project in 2023. In the images we can see carbonized rice husks before we grind them, how they arrive after we purchase them from the rice industry. Here we have the carbonized and ground husk after they've been ground up, and then we have the paste, the clay, plus the temper, which is the ground rice husk. So the carbonized rice husk is purchased from southern Brazil. It's not a local procurement, because that's where, in the southern Brazil, where we find there's a large production of rice and also processing of this material. So we end up having these leftovers. To grind this material, we use a wooden instrument, and this is done manually, and controlling this grinding, this powder that's produced in this grinding phase. So here the material hasn't been, we had the material before and after being ground almost near the end. And here in these images they show you this process of the mixture and the joining of this paste and the rice powder. So with this we've developed this clay paste. We've used it in our projects in basic education in the municipality of Parintins. This kind of temper has provided good results. It's provided a good paste. The paste has been good in handling, and after burning it has good final quality. We didn't do any lab testing yet, but it has been shown to be quite resistant, and it has good burning characteristics. These are child rattles that we make with them. Here we're shown some activities with kids at school. We can see them handling the material, the paste, to manufacture these little rattles. Here we have some images which are nice as well, because in our interactions with students in these public schools, we also, apart from heritage or material education, we also have talked about sustainability and the use of organic waste such as rice husks in the ceramic production, in the artisanal form production of ceramics. So we've done that with caripé, which is the basic temper material that we found in archaeological records, and the rice husk, which is the material that they handle, and kawishi samples they also handle as well, so they can learn about it. So the project has had good acceptance at schools. It's generated an interesting debate about archaeological remains and learning about ceramics, environmental sustainability, and underlining the use of temper. And we've involved students in the indigenous history lessons and the history of the Amazon region. Here we have some of our references, which are the basis of our work. And I think the take-home message is that this temper alternative was very important for us, so that we could connect sustainability and feasibility, because we would have had problems if we had used caripé, because there would have been times when the product would not have been able to progress due to the lack of this material. And also there's something that's one of the project's goals, which is to try and use sustainable materials. So we use for polishing the Najá seed, for incisions on the ceramics we use fish cartilage. So we've tried to use sustainable materials and tools, which also have some tie with the form of archaeological ceramic production, or something that we believe could be that. So we're trying to show them how this material reaches us today. So I think that's the message. Thank you for the opportunity to present this work, And now I'm at your service for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Clarice. And now we're going so we started in Romania, we've gone down to Brazil, and now we're going to China to hear from Bang Cheng Tang, who will talk about procreation worship by the fire.
Dear colleagues and friends, I'm Bang Cheng Tang from China. I'm very glad to participate in this international conferences in the field of experimental archaeology online. Next, as a representative of our team to give a speech, I will introduce to you some of the achievements of our Chinese bronze meteor experiment that has been carried out for 3 years. Since the relevant work has not been published yet, my introduction here may not be very detailed, please forgive me. The topic of my report today is procreation worship by the fire, a study of the portraitorials discovered at the bronze casting sites of the Song Dynasty in China. As is known to all, many tourists used in the bronze melting operations have been unearthed in different regions of Asia, such as Cyprus, Egypt. In the Bronze Age of China, a large number of tutorials has also been discovered. How were these tutorials used? Is there any connection between their shapes and functions? Are these tutorials also related to the common series phenomenon at the bronze casting site of the Song Dynasty in China? Through the methods of experimental archaeology, I will reconstruct different types of portraitorials and use them in the bronze melting operation to approve and try to answer these questions. Today's report mainly consists of 3 parts. Firstly, I will introduce the situation of the portraitorials discovered in the Bronze Age of China. Secondly, I will present the specific experiment process of the reconstruction the portraitorials and using them in the bronze melting operation. Finally, I will show some experimental results. Firstly, one introduction and background. In the Bronze Age of China, this study mainly focuses on the Song Dynasty from 1600 BC to 1046 BC in the bronze casting sites of the Song Dynasty in China. Some portraitorials had been discovered. According to the shape of these portraitorials, they can be roughly divided into 2 categories. One is the cylindrical portraitorials, and the other is the conical portraitorials. Among them, the number of the discovered conical portraitorials is more than that of the cylindrical portraitorials. Moreover, some conical portraitorials have a unique feature, that is, they have a cup-shaped or umbrella-shaped structure at their ends. In addition to being discovered at bronze casting sites, portraitorials from the Song Dynasty in China has also been found in the tombs of the bronze casting craftsmen, and most of them are conical portraitorials. Some remains after sacrificial achievements can also be below or near the furnace at bronze casting sites, such as secondary of the famous cattle, pigs, and so on. All this situation indicated that there may have been sacrificial behaviors during the bronze casting operation in the Bronze Age of China. Therefore, exploring the role of and studies of tutorials in the bronze casting operations may be of greater significance for understanding the sacrificial behaviors relating to bronze casting in the Bronze Age of China. Next, I will share some process related to the experiment. According to the archaeological excavation date, the clay around the bronze casting site was selected to reconstruct the conical portrait and the cylindrical portrait and the umbrella shape or cap-shaped structure at the end of the conical portrait was deliberately made. Then different types of the portrait were used in the bronze melting operation. It can be proved that these torus can be well applied to the bronze melting and to the temperature on the surface of the furnace is generally between 700 and 800 degrees Celsius. When using portrait for the bronze melting operation, with the air being blown into the furnace, a large number of the springs will fly up. In the ancient environment without modern ignite, these sparks may seem delicious and full of mystery. Next, I will share some of the research results. There are three main conclusions. First, through the experiment, it can be well explains why the numbers of the conical portrait discovered in China's Bronze Age is larger than that of the cylindrical portrait. The reason is that when using portrait to blast air for melting bronze in the furnace, the conical portrait has been better reference and higher reuse rate than the cylindrical portrait. This is because of the umbrella-shaped or cup-shaped structure of the conical portrait can provide protection, making the end of the portrait placed inside the furnace heat more evenly, and preventing the portrait from breaking due to the uneven heating. Second, through experimental archaeology, it has been found that the umbrella-shaped or cup-shaped structure on the torus has the function of the increasing the reuse rate and of the portrait. Third, when using portrait for bronze melting operations, both the deep sound emitted by the furnace and the thinning sparks flying out of the furnace mostly may be processed a certain sense of the mystery in the ancient environment. Both the shape of the portrait and the bronze bones of humans and animals with obvious reproductive function as females, cattle, and pigs near the furnaces implies that some of the sacrificial phenomena involved in the bronze casting site of the Song Dynasty in China may have a certain connection with a reproductive workshop. Regarding this aspect of work, relevant materials in ethnology and other fields will be combined in the follow-up, and a detailed analysis will be made. These are some of the references of this study. Once again, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all of you for your attentive listening. I sincerely invite each and every one of you to visit China for academic exchanges in the captivating realm of the experimental archaeology. As a proud member of EAC, I am more than willing to engage further. For those interested in the connection with me, kindly reach out to the relevant EAC representative for my contact details. Thank you all for your time and attention.
So indeed, unfortunately, Bang Cheng can't be present for the questions today, but if anyone wants to get in touch with him, just let me know. I can give you his details. Okay, are we on for... We have a slight technical issue. Okay, we're back. So now we are going to another country again, off to Ukraine, from Dmitry Moiseev, sorry, Dmitry, to look at the archaeological experiment of roof tiles production by backside cut technology.
Good day, dear colleagues. Today I want to present the result of the archaeological experiment of recreation, the main work tool of the backside cut technology of tile production. The Roman technology of tile production is the most well-known method of the building ceramic manufacturing in the ancient world. We understand how it functions, its tools and ways of transformation into other analogous technologies. It has been investigated organization of Roman military tile production and civil manufacture. The tools of Roman tile production technology are well known and consist of wooden frame and different types of knives that had used for different cuttings and for molding of side flanges. In the Mediterranean and the Black Sea region, there is another, more technologically advanced method of tile production. Produced with building ceramics, has common features as imprints of parts of matrix boxes and relief decorations. For example, the face of Jesus, 5th-6th centuries Tunisia, bird, 13th-14th centuries Crimea. No doubt, backside technology connects to the Roman military tile production. The only examples of Roman brick-side cut tegulae were found by excavation of Roman layers of Petra. In addition, backside cut technology known in Roman times in Bulgaria as special decorative terracotta. In the early Byzantine times, in Tunisia, this technology had used in production of decorative bricks. In the same time in Macedonia, it had been used for mass production of bricks with relief marks. This technology had used on the sides of Israel coastline for manufacturing of flanged tiles in 10th century. In the Middle Ages, backside cut flanged tiles had been produced in Armenia, Sakartvelo, Circassia, Crimea, and on the Lower Don. Nevertheless, most common using of this technology was in Crimea. Present, this technology is lost. Therefore, an ecological experiment was organized to reproduce one of the most significant parts of backside cut technology, a wooden matrix box, where tiles with relief decoration had been molded. Matrix is the wooden box with a bottom, where all feature elements of flanged tiles were carved off. Basic information about the design of matrices had been discovered by investigation of traces of repairs and wears which had been printed on flanged tiles. They were taken from excavation of different Crimean sites dated by 8th-9th century. Therefore, traces of repairs and wears of matrix boxes are various. They are the joints of the broken boards, repairs of the joints by metal clinches, some tiles imprints of tree structure of boards of matrix. The experiment had 4 stages. They connected to the 2 unsuccessful trying to reconstruct the worked design of matrix box. Another 2 stages consisted, at first, of successful reconstruction of the design of matrix box. At second, it is a series of experimental molding. First, design of the matrix. The construction of the matrix was reconstructed by example of flanged tile from excavation of tile production center Ilyinskaya. The field of the matrix was constructed of several boards with metal pins connections on its sides. The immediately taking of the roof tile from the matrix after the molding was unsuccessful. It was unsuccessful after 15 hours of night drying too. In addition, the network of cracks formed on the tile. After 40 hours of drying, cracks were jointed emptiness. As a result, the roof tile was taken off from the matrix by parts. The cause of the fail was is gluing of the tile to the wood of matrix box. Especially strong gluing was on the side flange. Second design of the matrix. The construction of the matrix was constructed by the example of flange tile from excavation of Tile Production Center Ilka. To prevent gluing of roof tile to the matrix, it will use some methods. At first, sand was used as anti-tack agent. At second, the width of the matrix was narrowed down. The roof tile from excavation of Ilka Tile Production Center was narrow. The design was improved by using only two boards for construction of the bottom of the matrix. The improvement shortened the production time for the matrix, and construction of the matrix became stronger. The immediately taking of the roof tile from the matrix of the second design was unsuccessful. After 2 hours of drying in the shadow, it was unsuccessful too, and the network of the cracks appeared. After 24 hours of drying, cracks were jointed emptiness. Thus, the roof tile was taken off from the matrix by parts after 5 days. However, the side flanges of the tile to the matrix of the second design and remained in the matrix despite of endeavor of extracting. As a result, despite of cracks have formed less than the previous one, experiment proved that drying in the matrix is impossible. To summarize, the experiment need other matrix design with immediate extraction option. Cutting the flanges of tile in the matrix box couldn't be a solution because Crimean ecological tiles often have imprints of wood on outer side of flanges. Third design of the matrix. There are fundamental changes in its construction. Side panels of the third design of the matrix have become removable. It was used wooden board with wooden lock. Also, as anti-tack agent was used ash. The immediately taking off the roof tile from the matrix of the third design was successful, without any damaging of and gluing of side flanges to it. So the design of the matrix solved the problem of flanges gluing to side boards. Archaeological experiments show that the main secret of backside cut matrix box was removable side panels. Let's see the whole process of the molding. After the 12th molding, a wooden lock on the removable side panel had broken. Imprints of this damaging of matrix bolts became visible on the outer part of the side flange. The ecological fragment from Partenit has a print of damaged lock mechanism on the outer edge of the flange too. The find from Hesonessors has rectangular hole in the outer edge of the side flange. It could be found under condition when lock mechanism of removable side panel was moved sideways to fit a new lock, and then something occasionally fell into old lock hole during the molding and imprinted as a hole on the side flange. After the first moldings, matrix began to wear out. Main weak points were detachment of the upper and lower bars. During the molding, clay packed into the hole between the upper or lower bars and boards of the bottom of the matrix and formed external rings. After 21 molding, the upper bar disconnected from the matrix. We can find external rims and full stop flange on almost of all archaeological flange tiles from Crimea, and they are similar to analogous morphological part on the experimental tiles. The second and third matrix design have feature of the rim on the place where two boards of the bottom of the matrix has connected. The rim present on the every roof tiles of 21 episodes of molding. With wearing out of the matrix, the rim became wider and higher. The repair of the matrix after 21st molding couldn't hide the connection between two boards of the bottom of the matrix, as it was before the first molding. Analogous rims are on the numerous medieval Crimean flanged tiles. In the end, we should say that archaeological analogies of the repairs and damaging of experimental matrix confirm the success of archaeological experiment. Thank you.
Okay, so I think some of our speakers are here. No? Yes? Okay, hello. Who is here out of the speakers? Who can we see? Maria? Okay, perfect. So yes, does anyone have any questions for Maria or Clarice or Dimitro? No one here? We have some questions from online, so I will ask them. So for Maria and Elena, where's it gone? There we go.
Yes, we are here.
Hello. The question is, would you consider waterproofing the pots with other kinds of animal fat? Why did you choose pork fat?
So we choose pork fat because we find in our excavations a lot of pork bones. So we think that they use pork fat, and also ethnographically. So I'm from the countryside, and my mother, when I was little, just used the pork fat on the vessel. Okay, so it's kind of ethnographically. And we consider using yogurt because also it's kind of ethnographic. We don't have some how to say it, analysis made on the pots, because in Cucuten culture they are burning at 900 Celsius degree, and these organic materials does not resist on ceramics. So we are based on ethnographically sources.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question. Can you do comparisons with the composition, so the material composition between these vessels and other ceramic objects like figurines, etc.?
No, no, because so this type C pottery is kind of unique in Cucuten culture, because it has a lot of straws and the shells and sand, and the other ceramics is very clean, and that's all we know. And also the anthropomorphic or zoomorphic figurines, we don't. I mean, we didn't made analysis on the clay because we don't think it's really relevant. I mean, they are just figurines, so we didn't do any analysis.
Just figurines, my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
We have a question for Clarice, which I am handing to my colleague who can speak Portuguese, so she can ask the question in Portuguese.
Oi, Clarice. Ontem a gente teve uma conversa com a
we
Nathalie.
had a conversation with Natalie, and she said that with several students from school with whom she works, they don't have strength on their fingers because they don't use their hands so much, and they are not familiar with the process of producing things with their hands. So she wants to know if you realized something like that with your students. Hi, good afternoon. I'm going to answer in Portuguese too. I thank you for your question. We have already worked with an expressive number of schools in different school ages. It's always from the 6th to the 9th grade and high school. We didn't notice that, except for very specific cases with children who actually have special needs. But even those kids, they didn't have much difficulty. Of course, you need to have more care and attention with them, but they were able to respond well. So we didn't realize that. And that, we should also consider that maybe, thinking about what you said, those are schools that are more city schools, urban schools. And even if we are a municipality, we are a small town. So kids here are more engaged with these hands-on practices and handcraft. They write a lot. They don't use electronics as much. And so I think that maybe that is why it's different in our case. The culture is different and the social reality is also different in our small town. Okay, thank you, Clarice.
Thank you very much. Do we have any final questions from the audience here? No? Okay, then I will say thank you very much to our speakers for a really interesting session. And we will be having a very quick break now because unfortunately one of our talks from the next session isn't happening. So that means we have a spare few minutes for a little bit of a break before we jump into the next session. So just 5 minutes break to grab a drink and then we'll be back. Our ceramics three-parter session. So in session 6, we will be hearing from a couple of in-person speakers, but first we are starting with Maria Kurant from Poland, who will be telling us about temper of animal and human-related origin in prehistoric ceramics in the light of experimental, traceological, and physiochemical studies.
Hello everyone, my name is Maria Kurant and I am a student at Nicolaus Copernicus University in Toruń, Poland. Today I would like to present the results of my archaeological experiment and research regarding temper of animal and human-related origin in prehistoric ceramics in the light of experimental, traceological and physicochemical studies. The problem of identifying various types of temper of animal origin and related to a human body in prehistoric pottery is of great importance for research on the technology of pottery from this period, including primarily the Neolithic and Sub-Neolithic, but also for studies on the spiritual culture and manifestations of ritual behaviors of early Holocene communities, which, as has recently turned out more often, were expressed in temper used in pottery. Studies on organic temper have largely focused on admixtures of plant origin due to the fact that they appear in pottery much more often than those of animal origin, even accidentally as a result of clay contamination. This topic has already been discussed in literature, but the degree of its development should undoubtedly be considered insufficient because so far only basic types of temper, such as bone or shells, have been analyzed in very general terms. Other types of temper, for example meat, blood, hair, nails, wool, antler and feathers, have not been truly studied so far, and their possible use by prehistoric societies has not been verified in any way, both at the level of experimental research and analysis of historic materials. Moreover, the research conducted so far was usually of individual cases, sometimes presented as a curiosity, and was often conducted within a considerable time span, which is why the current knowledge on this field is very dispersed. There is definitely a lack of study that would combine existing and new research, allowing for the creation of some kind of classification, making it possible for interested researchers to identify individual types of temper in question. In order to conduct the experiment, 16 tiles were made from ready-made ceramic mass, 2 for each type of admixture. The temper used were chicken eggshells, snail shells, burnt crushed antler, burnt antler ground in a fine powder, crushed burnt bones, wool, hair, and ground meat. The bone and antler were burnt in a fire pit. Tiles of similar dimensions were prepared, 3 to 4 cm wide and 4.5 cm long. Each sample was given a number from 1 to 8. The drying process lasted 3 days, then they were fried in a ceramic kiln at 800 degrees Celsius and left to cool until next day. Photography documentation of the tiles was made at each stage. Photographs of the surface were taken before firing, after firing, as well as photographs of the cross sections. The photographs were taken under a microscope at 10, 20 and 40 times magnification. To simulate post-depositional processes, an ultrasonic washer was used. Fragments with a predominantly calcium admixture, eggshell shells, antlers and bone, were left in the washer for half an hour, then dried and the changes documented. Chicken eggshells were crushed with a stone. The ceramic mass, created by this kind of temper, lost its smoothness, and the result the tile is rough and the surface is difficult to smooth it. The tile retained its shape in the drying process. After drying, the impurities on the surface of the tile became more visible. Fragments of shells are brittle, falling out of the surface, creating negatives. Clear cracks are visible on the surface. The temper is very visible in the cross-section. The shells have not been completely burnt, they are brittle and fill the entire cracks. They have a rectangular shape and an intense white color. After rinsing in an ultrasonic washer, there are visible negatives left by the eggshell fragments. They have a regular rectangular shape and leave a polygonal slightly curved negatives. The surfaces of the negatives are smooth with a slightly wavy eggshell texture. They also have small cracks. Sometimes shell fragments lying deeper within the ceramic mass are visible, but this is probably the result of the relatively short time the washer was in the operation. The antler was burnt in a fire pit, then crushed with a stone mortar. On the surface of the unfired tile, it is black, grey and white, depending on the degree of carbonization. The ceramic mass created as a result of adding this temper was not distinguished by its special plasticity. In the drying process, the plate did not lose its original shape. As a result of firing, the antler turned white and became brittle, as it is distinguishable on the surface. You can see sporadic small cracks. The admixture did not shrink during firing and fills the cracks precisely. The temper is clearly visible in the cross-section in form of white irregular particles. The cross-section surface is porous and numerous small negatives can be seen. The brittle antler falls out of the surface of the cross-section, leaving irregular depressions. Rinsing in an ultrasonic cleaner revealed irregular negatives of larger pieces of antler. The antler was ground in a fine powder using a stone mortar. The powder gave the ceramic mass unexpected plasticity. The mass was easy to shape and smooth. During the drying process, the plate retains its shape. A small admixture is visible on the surface in the form of dark particles before firing. After firing, the ground antler turned white. The particles are visible on the surface of the plate and are firmly attached to it. There is no shrinkage, the particles are anchored in the mass. Small negatives are visible sporadically. After firing, the tile was more durable than the previous ones and it showed great resistance to crumbling. In the cross-section, the temper is very visible, white in color and evenly distributed. Small irregular negatives can be noticed. The bone was burned in a fire pit, then crushed into smaller pieces using a stone mortar. Before firing, the temper is easily visible in the ceramic mass in the form of charred irregular lumps. The temper had no effect on the sculpting process. The surface of the tile became rough and it retained its shape during the drying process. After firing, the bone fragments changed their color to white. Numerous cracks and fissures appeared, caused by the crumbling and falling out of the bone particles. In the cross-section, the bone temper has the same characteristics as the crushed antler. It is very difficult to distinguish them. The temper is white in color and the negatives are irregular. To make the temper, wool from Polish heath sheep was used. Wool added to the ceramic mass made it more durable during the process of forming the tiles. The mass was difficult to form and divide into smaller portions. The wool clung together and was unevenly distributed inside the tile. As a result of uneven distribution, the admixture was visible in the form of single fibers before firing. The tile retained its shape when dried. After firing, the fibers were still preserved in the surface of the plate, but as a result of the temperature, they partially crumbled or split into smaller pieces. They took on a darker brownish color. Negatives of the fibers are also visible. The appearance of the temper in the cross-section is interesting. Fibers are visible, as well as negatives from individual hairs in the form of small tunnels. The clay and temper have taken on various colors, from orange to yellow, greenish, and dark blue. The arrangement of fibers is clearly visible, resulting from the kneading of the mass and the formation of the tile. Empty spaces are also visible. This color might be the result of moisture remaining in the wool during firing or cutting off the air supply to the interior of the tile, thereby causing an intentional reduction firing. Due to the uneven distribution of the temper, it is difficult to determine its effect on the strength of the fired tile. Hair in the ceramic mass behaves similarly to wool, but on an even larger scale. The mass was difficult to divide and shape due to its strength. The temper before firing was visible on the surface of the tiles in form of tangled clumps, and the fibers inside were unevenly distributed. The tile did not lose its shape during the drying process. After firing, the hair, similarly to wool, split into smaller fibers and crumbled in places, leaving intricate negatives. It also changed its color to brown. The temper in cross-section looks similar to the wool temper. A process occurred as a result of which the ceramic mass changed color to yellow and blue-gray. The fiber agglomeration is very visible in the cross-sections, and there are negatives in form of small tunnels. The arrangement of hairs is visible, resulting from the kneading of the ceramic mass and shaping. To make this damper, ground meat was used. The addition of meat made the tile extremely difficult to shape and smooth due to its texture. The admixture was evenly distributed. After the drying process, the tile was deformed and became very brittle, much more so than tiles with other kinds of temper used. The surface of the tile before firing is very porous and irregular. After firing, the tile remained very brittle and irregular. Large pieces fell off its surface. Fragments of the mass mixed with meat can be distinguished due to the irregular negatives. The most interesting thing, however, was the cross-section of the tile. The interior of the tile is filled with multicolored layers, most likely the result of moisture being trapped inside and unplanned reduction firing. The layer is dark blue and green-yellow. Numerous longitudinal depressions can be seen in the layer. Snail shells were crushed with a stone. The ceramic mass, similar to the eggshells, lost its smoothness, but to a lesser extent. The shell pieces were sharp, which made shaping the tile difficult. The delicately opalescent fragments are easily visible on the surface. The tile retained its shape during drying. After firing, the pieces became dull, less sharp and brittle. They crumbled from the surface of the tile. Cracks appeared around the temper. there was a slight shrinkage of the shell fragments which caused them to easily fall out of the tile, creating variously shaped negatives on the surface. The negatives left by the shells have a distinctly wavy surface, an example of which is shown below. This fragment was washed in an ultrasonic cleaner. The bone temper and the crushed antler temper are indistinguishable from each other at the level of microscopic examination. Further analysis with additional methods is needed to establish the origin of the admixture. It is worth paying attention to the texture of the interior of the negatives left by the shell fragments, because this is the thing that makes it easy to distinguish this kind of temper from, for example, the rather similar eggshell temper. Negatives left by shells have a clearly wavy surface shown on the photos. The use of different kinds of temper yielded satisfactory results. Despite their similar morphology, temper from eggshells and shells can be easily distinguished by paying attention to the shape and texture of the negatives they left behind. Temper from burned crushed antler and crushed bone are indistinguishable using microscopic analysis. The temper from powdered antler proved to be an ingredient improving the properties of the ceramic mass during the forming process, as well as the properties of the ceramic after firing. The temper from wool and hair yielded mixed results. Analysis of the surface after firing yielded the expected results. However, perhaps this part of the experiment should be repeated, as it was trying to distribute the admixture more evenly in the structure of the tile to avoid trapping moisture inside. The admixture from meat yielded unexpected results. However, due to poor quality of the manufactured tile, it is unlikely that it could have been used by prehistoric communities. When comparing the photos taken and the photos from the source materials, it can be assumed that the temper used produced similar results. The next step will be comparison with archaeological material. My aim is to create a classification of the effects of using the different types of temper. A catalog is illustrated with microphotographs and the results of physico-chemical tests such as SEM-ADX and GCMS, to be the source enabling the researchers to search for analogies for the ceramics they are examining. The planned research may also provide completely new data for studies of the sepulchral sphere and ritual behaviors of the prehistoric communities. This knowledge about animal and human temper acquired during experimental research and related to interdisciplinary analysis will be used to study prehistoric ceramics, which will be fragments of vessels from a unique site in Šventoryj, Lithuania. Fragments of ceramics containing organic temper in the form of shells and hair have already been found. I also plan to make changes to the experimental plan to make it more credible. For example, use clay specially extracted and prepared using prehistoric techniques, fire it in a fire pit to simulate prehistoric fire cooking process, use wooden molds to standardize the size and shape of the tiles.
Checking the mic is working. Yeah, good. Okay, thank you very much. So now we have our next speakers, and I've lost my piece of paper so I can pronounce your name, Andrea Kudelik. Yeah. Hey. So if you'd like to go up on the stage, and you can go up here. I guess you don't have to. No, you could stay there. Can the camera pick her up here? Okay. Yeah, just because the camera is there. So if you can stay in like this general area, and there is a This can. Yeah. Alternatively, you can also just tell Luan, and Luan can do it for you. Okay. Okay. So, yes, Andrea will be talking all about reconstructing the incrustation technique.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Okay, my name is Andrea Kudolic. I'm here with my colleagues Natalie and Ina Miloglav from the University of Zagreb. We came all the way to Brazil. And today I will present the results of a research on reconstructing the incrustation technique, a post-firing method used to decorate prehistoric pottery in Croatia. Is there any way just to turn the lights off? Maybe it would be much more visible. No? Okay. 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 Yeah. So the white paste inlay or incrustation is a distinctive and widespread pottery decoration technique, particularly popular within the Carpathian Basin. It involves applying of a white paste into engraved motifs, creating a striking contrast against dark pottery surfaces. In Croatia, this long-standing tradition began in the Middle Neolithic and continued through the Late Neolithic. However, it became most prominent during the Copper Age, especially in the Kostolec and Vucedol cultures. It is also characteristic but less prevalent in the Bronze Age, especially Pannonian complex of encrusted pottery, and it's less common during the early and late Bronze Age. Initially, the research on this decoration technique focused mainly on stylistic aspects. However, recent advancements in analytical methods have shifted attention to its production process and material composition. So studies across Europe reveal regional variation in raw material. For example, in northern Italy, inlays were typically made from talc and bone powder, while in the Carpathian Basin, inlay was composed of calcite, hydroxyapatite from bones, and aragonite from mollusk shells. It has been observed that mollusk shells were predominantly used in the Copper Age, while the bone became more common during the Bronze Age. While it is assumed that the raw material were burned, ground, and mixed with binders, the exact method of homogenizing the paste and applying the inlay still remains unclear. Experimental research has yet to confirm how the binder functioned and how the inlay was fixed. To better understand how the white paste inlay was made and applied, this study focused on three main objectives. Analyze the composition of late copper and the Bronze Age inlays to identify the raw material used. To reconstruct manufacturing and application process by testing hypotheses about binding materials, challenging the idea of organic or clay-based binders and instead proposing lime and bone-based plaster technique. And finally, the goal is to propose a recipe, production technique, and application method, all supported by analytical methods and archaeological experiment. This study is the first to take an integrated approach combining controlled and real condition experiments with materials identified through X-ray diffraction, infrared spectroscopy, and thin section microscopy on Copper Age and Bronze Age pottery from Croatia. It's good. I think it. Okay. So, to determine the raw material used for inlays, 20 decorated vessel samples were examined, 10 from late Copper Age and 10 from early and middle Bronze Age. These samples came from 8 archaeological sites across Croatia. Complementary analytical methods were applied. What is going on? I'm sorry. Natalie. Wow, I'm so sorry. Natalie, to se jednom dogodilo. A u čemu je fora? I'm so sorry. Sad ne mogu jedna druga, treća, četvrta, peta. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Čekaj. Is it still playing? So the analysis, while they're doing this, I will just go on. So these analysis of the archaeological ceramics show that they confirmed the presence of bone material, calcite and aragonite in the inlays. The bone-based inlays displayed phosphate and carbonate absorption bands, with some samples indicating complete calcination. Some inlays with strong carbonate signals contain calcite, while aragonite peaks confirmed mollusk shell origin. So this was it. The results of the analysis of the archaeological ceramics. Thin section microscopy further support these findings, revealing distinct difference in the composition and texture between Copper Age and Bronze Age inlay. So Copper Age inlay were composed of fine-grained carbonate paste with characteristic mollusk shell fragments, while the Bronze Age inlay contained poorly sorted bone fragments with fibrous microstructure and occasional mineral inclusions. These findings confirmed that the Copper Age inlay were produced from burned and powdered bone and mollusk shell, while Bronze Age potters primarily used bone material. So, despite these insights, several key questions remain unanswered. How was the white paste prepared and applied to the pottery? What firing conditions and duration were needed to process the raw material and achieve the desirable properties? How was the paste homogenized, and what type of binding agent ensured its durability and adhesion? To address these questions, we propose that potters used lime and bone-based plaster rather than organic or clay-based binders. Bones are composed of bioapatite and transform into hydroxyapatite by firing above 700 Celsius degrees. Mollusk shells are composed of aragonite and decompose into calcite by firing above 450 Celsius degrees. Heating calcite further to 700 and 800 degrees removes CO2, forming quicklime, which when slaked with water produces hydrated lime. This material hardens through carbonation, forming a durable lime plaster. Our experiment tested these hypotheses, which could produce a plastic yet durable inlay suitable for pottery decoration. Experiments were conducted both in real condition and in the control laboratory environment. Mollusk shells, animal bones, deer antler, and human bones were used as raw material. Throughout the process, we monitored temperature change, pulverization properties, and final inlay characteristics, including paste texture and color. The experiment inlays were analyzed using the same scientific method as the archaeological samples to enable a direct comparative analysis of their composition and microstructure. The initial experiment was conducted in an open fire at 700 and 800 Celsius degrees with a short soaking time. Mollusk shells were placed inside the ceramic vessel, covered and placed in the center of the bonfire. After an hour, the firing process ended and the shells were removed while still hot. Shells remained whole, but when water was added, they quickly disintegrated into a thick grayish-white paste. After mixing, we obtained a homogeneous paste that was easy to apply to pre-fired pottery. After 24 hours, the material hardened into a durable lime plaster, keeping the inlay intact even after washing. In contrast, during the experiment in real condition, animal bone firing was unsuccessful. The bones did not calcify because too short exposure to high temperatures. Therefore, we had to test bone material in more controlled conditions. We increased the firing time, soaking duration, and temperature in a controlled setting, and used and reveal a difference in texture. Therefore, in some cases, sieving was required in order to get a fine powder. Once ground into powder, water was added slowly while mixing to create a homogeneous thick paste, which was then shaped into briquettes to test their strength. After 24 hours of drying, they hardened, demonstrating their potential for bone-based plaster material. In this case, we didn't have pottery, to fill it and to test it. The results showed clear difference in texture and color among the various bone-based material. For example, human bones produced fine white powder, while animal long bones and skull fragments were harder, yellowish, and they required multiple sieving steps. Antler was the easiest to grind and homogenize, and it produces the whitest powder. By comparing the analysis of archaeological and experimental incrustation paste, microscopic analysis showed that the experimental shell-based plaster did not entirely match Copper Age inlays, which had a finer and more uniform structure. However, shell fragments shared similarities in shape and composition. Differences in optical properties suggest either a lower firing temperature in our experiment or incomplete carbonation of the lime. In contrast, the experimental antler and bone-based plasters closely resemble Bronze Age inlays. Both archaeological and experimental samples display fibrous microstructure with osteons, though experimental inlays showed more pronounced firing effect, such as a darker coloration and occasional vitrification. Infrared spectroscopy and X-ray diffraction confirm that experimental and archaeological bone-based plaster contain hydroxyapatite. On the other hand, shell fired at 800 degrees primarily contain calcite, matching some archaeological samples, while those fired at 400 degrees retained aragonite, also found in archaeological sample. In conclusion, analysis of prehistoric inlay from Croatia identified three main components: hydroxyapatite, aragonite, and calcite. Bone-based material dominated the Bronze Age, while Copper Age samples showed greater variability in incorporating mollusk shells. The presence of calcite in shell-based inlays indicate heating above 450 degrees. Some Copper Age samples preserve aragonite, suggesting a lower firing temperature or mixing of unfired shell material with slaked lime. Experiments therefore confirm that both bone and shell material could be successfully transformed into durable plasters through thermal treatment above 700 Celsius degrees. Moreover, this process aligns with the principles of slaked lime-like technology, proving that prehistoric communities not only applied this method but also understood the transformative properties and benefits of heating and rehydrating specific raw materials. These findings provide the first direct experimental validation of prehistoric inlay making technique and offer compelling evidence that early artisans possessed sophisticated knowledge of material transformation processes. Moreover, the production of inlays was likely interlinked with other crafts and social activities such as pottery firing, metallurgy, and funerary practice. The choice of inlay material may have been culturally significant. Bronze Age Pannonian communities consistently used bone, while Copper Age groups exhibited greater flexibility incorporating mollusk shells. The preference for bone-based inlays in the Bronze Age coincide with the emergence of cremation as a widespread funerary practice. This connection could suggest a deeper cultural and symbolical significance of bone processing, extending beyond pottery decoration to a broader ritual and technological shift in prehistoric societies. Thank you, and sorry for this fast switching.
Thank you, Andrea. That's you just needed to speak quicker to get with the with the slides. Perfect. Then we have our last talk for this session by Nathalie Neral. I'm sorry, I hope I remembered your name because I've lost my program. But Nathalie Neral, would you like to stand down here or up there? Yes, here. Just be careful of here. Would you like the keyboard? Yeah, perfect. So yes, Nathalie will be talking about, drumroll, introduction. Okay, there we go. Insights into raw material selection in prehistoric pottery. Oh yes. Is the timing off? Like the last one? Yeah, it's okay. Perfect. Perfect.
So hello everyone, my name is Natalie, and today I will present the results of an experimental study exploring the physical and mechanical properties of ceramics to better understand how raw materials were selected for prehistoric pottery production in Croatia. The pottery making process begins with a crucial step, selecting the right raw materials. This choice directly affects the quality, durability, and performance of the final ceramic product. Several factors influence the material selection, including local availability, technological requirements, and the desired properties of the pottery. Archaeological and ethnographic research suggests that communities primarily use locally available raw materials sourced near settlement or production sites. Recent research on prehistoric pottery in Croatia has shown that one of the most commonly used and readily available materials was sandy clay, naturally rich in mineral inclusions such as quartz and feldspar. However, inclusion-poor or fat clays containing fewer mineral inclusions were also used, though less frequently. This is particularly evident in the lowland regions of continental Croatia, where alluvial plains deposited a variety of clay types. Inclusion-poor clays formed under low energy conditions or through prolongated transport and sorting, resulting in a higher concentration of clay minerals. While this increased plasticity made the clay more challenging to work with, such clays were still used in prehistoric pottery productions. The reasons behind their selection, however, remain unclear and require further investigation. In addition to the clay, potters commonly added tempers, materials intentionally mixed into the clay. Tempers improved workability, reduced shrinkage and plasticity, and enhanced thermal shock resistance and heat efficiency. During prehistory, various types of tempers were used in pottery production across Croatia. However, the reasons behind the selection of specific materials remain unclear. It is not always evident why certain types of temper were chosen or why some were preferred over others. Therefore, understanding why certain raw materials, including both clay and tempers, were selected is crucial to provide valuable insights into this material selection in prehistoric pottery production. So the aims of this research are to understand how variations in raw materials influence the physical and mechanical properties of ceramics, particularly their durability and resistance to stress from everyday use, handling, and transport. Additionally, to examine whether the addition of tempering materials produce uniform mechanical properties across various clay types, or whether specific tempers interact differently depending on the clay composition. And lastly, the aim is to examine whether the raw material selection was driven by functional requirements, resources availability, or other factors, and whether these considerations applied equally to clays and tempering materials. The aims of this research this experimental study examines two types of clay, sandy clay and inclusion-poor clay. The clays analyzed in this study were collected from alluvial terraces near archaeological sites in continental Croatia, areas likely exploited by prehistoric communities. It examines four tempering materials: calcite, grog, sand, and vegetal material, commonly used in prehistoric pottery production in Croatia and neighboring regions. Sand was collected from areas near the Sava River in continental Croatia. Calcite was sourced from carbonate rock formations along the Adriatic coast. Grog was produced by crushing previously made experimental ceramic vessels, and the vegetal materials was replicated using dry cow dung based on its presence in archaeological ceramics. The analytical methods, including Atterberg limits and X-ray diffraction, are used to accurately characterize the clay materials. Atterberg limits is used to assess the clay plasticity, while XRD analysis is used to determine the bulk mineral composition and identify individual clay minerals that significantly influence the clay's properties. The preparation of experimental samples began with achieving the appropriate workability of the inclusion-poor clay. The sandy clay required no special preparation as it was collected in already appropriate plastic condition. The tempering materials underwent various preparation processes based on their specific types. Calcite and grog were manually crushed and sieved through 1 and 0.25 millimeter sieves to replicate the tempering characteristics documented in archaeological ceramics. Similarly, sand was sieved through the same mesh sizes. The completely dry cow dung was manually disintegrated to achieve the desired consistency. The experimental samples were formed using a standardized mold of 72 cubic centimeters. Each sample was prepared by mixing 50 cubic centimeters of clay with 20 cubic centimeters of temper, reflecting similar proportions found in archaeological ceramics. The tempers was mixed with clay by hand to ensure even distribution. This process resulted in the preparation of samples with 10 different recipes, each with 7 replicas, therefore making 70 samples in total. After 3 weeks of gradual drying, without direct exposure to sunlight or a heat source, the samples were fired in the laboratory kiln. The initial firing at 650 degrees for 45 minutes, including a 15-minute soaking period, resulted in successful firing of sandy clay samples. However, briquettes made of inclusion pore clay developed cracks. To address this, a second set was fired with an extended warm-up phase, aiming to prevent cracking. However, even after 90 minutes, the non-tempered and vegetal tempered samples still fractured. Those tempered with calcite, sand and grog remained intact. A third firing regime, extending the process to 2 hours, was then tested. However, even with this adjustment, non-tempered and vegetal tempered samples developed cracks. Experimental samples that survived firing were subjected to shrinkage assessment and the point load index test to evaluate their physical and mechanical properties. Shrinkage was measured by comparing each sample's initial volume after formation to its final volume after firing, assessing how much the material compacted during drying and firing. The point load strength test was conducted to evaluate the strength of the ceramic of the experimental samples. As shown in the image, each sample was placed in the tester and a constant force was applied until it cracked. The force required to break the sample was then recorded. The Atterberg limits analysis revealed, here are the results. The Atterberg limits analysis revealed distinct plasticity. As shown in the figure, sandy clay falls near the boundary between moderate and high plasticity on the Casagrande plasticity chart. In contrast, inclusion pore clay may be classified as highly plastic. These differences correspond to variations in clay mineral composition. X-ray diffraction analysis of the fraction smaller of 2 micrometers revealed key differences. Sandy clay is dominated by well-crystallized kaolinite with low smectite content. Conversely, inclusion pore clay contains a higher total proportion of clay minerals, and particularly swelling clay minerals like smectite and mixed layer smectite chlorite. Due to their ability to absorb water into both their surfaces and intra-layer spaces, the increased clay mineral content leads to greater water absorption capacity. As a result, inclusion pore clay exhibits significantly higher plasticity compared to sandy clay. The differences in plasticity and clay mineral composition are clearly seen in the shrinkage values. Sandy clay samples show shrinkage between 9 and 24%. Inclusion pore clay samples have much higher shrinkage, ranging from 28 to 39%. Interestingly, the highest shrinkage in sandy clay is still lower than the lowest shrinkage in inclusion pore clay. Because inclusion pore clays have high plasticity, they experience more shrinkage as more water evaporates during drying and firing. This increased shrinkage makes the firing process more challenging. The higher the shrinkage, the greater the risk of cracking, as the rising water vapor pressure within the material can cause the ceramics to fail. The figure illustrates the point load index testing results, revealing significant differences in ceramic strength. The lowest strength value recorded for inclusion poor clay samples exceeded the highest value measured for sandy clay samples, indicating that ceramics made from inclusion poor clay are substantially stronger. In sandy clay samples, strength values were similar across calcite, grog, sand-tempered and non-tempered samples, while vegetal-tempered samples show slightly lower strength. For inclusion poor clay, grog-tempered samples had the highest strength, while sand-tempered samples had the lowest within this group. The investigated clays exhibit notable differences in physical properties. Inclusion poor clay contains a higher proportion of fine clay particles and swelling minerals, while sandy clay has more subangular to subraunded crystalloclasts such as quartz and feldspar. Findings from this research suggest that this mineral ratio plays a key role in shaping the physical properties of raw clay materials and their resulting ceramic products. Inclusion poor clay has higher plasticity and shrinkage due to its greater proportion of swelling clay minerals, particularly smectite. During shaping and drying, it experiences significant water loss, making it prone to deformation, which poses a challenge for potters. In contrast, sandy clay, with its lower clay mineral content, has medium plasticity, making it easier to shape and dry. However, previous research shows that potters consistently added rock or grog temper to inclusion poor clay to reduce plasticity and shrinkage, enhancing the clay's ease of shaping and drying. Interestingly, the conducted experiments revealed that non-tempered inclusion poor clay cannot withstand thermal stresses, even under slow firing conditions. Therefore, to prevent cracking, potters must add tempers such as calcite, grog or sand and fire it more gradually. In contrast, sandy clay remains structurally stable regardless of the temper, making its firing process less demanding. These findings suggest that potters adapted their techniques based on the type of clay used. While inclusion poor clays required more complex preparation and longer firing times, they produced stronger ceramics, indicating that prehistoric potters recognized and deliberately chose this clay for its enhanced strength, despite the challenges in its preparation. And in conclusion, this research has confirmed that clay raw materials play an important role in shaping the technological process of ceramic production and significantly influence the physical and mechanical properties of ceramics. Furthermore, the findings highlight that potters were required to adjust their production techniques to align with the specific properties of the clays they utilized, ensuring the successful production of functional ceramic products. The results suggest that prehistoric communities primarily opted for sandy clay due to its accessibility and ease of preparation and more effective firing. However, the intentional use of inclusion poor clay by certain communities reflects a more strategic choice driven by the functional advantages it provided. Despite the more complex preparation and firing processes, these communities prioritized inclusion poor clays for its ability to yield stronger and more durable ceramics, highlighting a preference for material strength and durability over processing simplicity. And here are the founders of this project, and thank you for your attention. And I would just like to say that the results of this research are published yesterday in Applied Clay Science Journal.
Congratulations on the publication. That's wonderful news. Thank you very much. So we have time for questions, and I have some questions from online people, but does anyone here has some to start with? No? Okay, then I will start for online. Is Maria there? Yes. Hello, Maria. Oh, Maria cannot hear me. Hello, Maria. Can you hear me? Okay. I'll start with Andrea then instead. So a question for Andrea. I will bring the microphone here. Do you know, sorry, this one first. Do you have any insight over which material was, and it's in quotes, easiest to process? Because it seemed, I guess, the shells seemed easier, but...
The easiest to process are the antler. Yeah, they're the most soft. They disintegrate easier, and they're the whitest and the most beautiful.
Yeah, okay, good to know. Okay, I also thought the shells would have been easiest because you just put them in a pot, but
Yeah. The shells are easier, but they need a little bit of more, preparation. So I would say the antler. Yeah.
wait, because we have one more. Do you know why there was a change between the copper and the bronze age vessels in material composition? Were there new production processes in place, etc.?
Well, there is a difference between the copper and the Bronze Age communities. This is the cultural difference. So in that way, I guess that the technological difference is also the product of these changes. So I guess that's why. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Maria, can you hear me? Still no. Okay, that's fine. We have a question for Natalie. Maria has just messaged to say she cannot hear anything, but she can write her answers here as well. So if anyone has a question for Maria, I can write it in there. But Natalie, the question is, would they have had sieves at this time, or what would have been the comparable technique or tool used?
No, they don't have sieves, but they just crushed the material and. Okay, so I need to say that I'm a geologist, and Andrea is archaeologist. No, it's okay. But she just said that in prehistory they had sieves. So yeah, that's the answer. They had sieves. But we observed the characteristics of tempering materials found in archaeological ceramics and tried to produce the same material characteristics and the same size of tempering materials with sieves. But yeah, obviously they had sieves.
No, I was just curious. I assumed indeed it was because of the grinding, but then maybe they had sieves. Okay, interesting. Oh, very nice, good. So Maria is okay. I think she's having some problems hearing things, but yeah, if anyone has any questions for her, let me know. I can type them, and I will share the answer with you. Any other questions for our speakers? No? Okay, then I think we will finish this session. We are on time. This is incredible. We're actually even slightly early, which means we hadn't scheduled a break because we didn't have time, but now we have time. So we have 15 minutes for a quick break. Please try to be back here for past, though, so that we can start and finish with a bang. the translators frantically putting on their headphones, but it's okay, it's just for the people here.
Aos brasileiros, retornem à sala, por favor.
Brazilians.
Aí, galera, bora?
Do you want me to do this one? Yeah, I can do it if you want, and then you can do the final ta-da-da. Yeah. You've done a lot of them. Okay. Oh. Yeah, we good? Yes? All good? Yeah, perfecto. Good. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so for this session, final session, oops, oh dear, am I still there? Yes. Final session of the 14th edition of the Experimental Archaeology Conference, very exciting. Again, unfortunately, one of our speakers cannot be here, Danilo Campos Borumkren and Lilian Panachuk. And also Claudia, unfortunately, was here on Monday, but she couldn't stay. So she has recorded her talk, though, and that is also online. So first we will start, though, with someone in person, Lucia Di Rombola, who will talk to us again about the things that she teased us about in her presentation yesterday, ceramic perforation techniques.
Oi, boa tarde. Bom, como ontem,
Like yesterday, I'll speak English, and so I'll switch languages now. Okay. Então, mudando de língua agora, vou continuar aqui.
briefly introduce
vou
why I'm
apresentar
presenting
rapidamente
this.
por
So
que eu
this
estou
is not
apresentando.
something like I work with, but for graduation I had a seminar of ceramics and I had to make an experimentation. And then last year, because of a publication, I started to work on that again to publish it. So I will show you that. It's called Ceramic Perforation Techniques in Hunter-Gatherer Sites from the Lower Paraná Wetland, an Experimental Approach, with Sheila Ali, Lucas González Nogueira, Clara Álvarez Cortina, Miriam Carbonera, and Natasha Book, who are my advisors. And next one. Okay, so the aims are to evaluate the methods by which the hunter-gatherers of the Lower Paraná wetland made the perforations in their ceramics. So for that we made an experimental design or approach to reflect on the technological choices, to see the effectiveness on the tools used, and also see the different ways to use them at different drying stages of the vessel. And then we checked or we saw the archaeological collection of the El Espinillo site, where we had like 40 perforated vessels. Okay, so why perforations? During all my studies at university, I always saw the work in ceramic that was related to the morphology or maybe the technical process, but it didn't include some parts of the chain operatoire. In this case, it was the perforation. Like I never saw, at least when I studied, people talking about how they perforated the vessels, and this is important because there are different functions, suspension, or maybe to knot, or maybe to mend, and it wasn't clear for me, but I saw in the archaeological sites I work with perforation, so that's why I thought about this experimentation at this class, and because for me they were often ignored, and for me that is mainly because people think, okay, it's a perforation, it should be so easy to use, so like why should we study that? And also because not also the perforations for me are kind of ignored, but also the tools, because some tools are really hard to recognize, like to work with ceramics and to do a vessel. You use lots of materials, and maybe those materials or weren't preserved in the archaeological record, or it's really hard to distinguish them, because if they were materials like, for example, today with the tattoos we did, like it was a palm tree, and so that maybe wouldn't be preserved in the archaeological record, but it's something we use. And if it were preserved, how can I distinguish it from like how can I tell if it was used or not used just with the function? But sometimes we don't pay attention to those things we don't see with a shape of a tool. So like this kind of motivated this project. We work with the anthropology of techniques, so like the theory of this project was to think of the process to make a ceramic vessel from the raw material until the finished product, and of course this involves the knowledge of the people, the abilities, their beliefs of whether a raw material is good or bad, and that not only depends on the raw material and its physical properties on itself, but also depends on the beliefs of the people, because maybe they can choose a raw material to use because it has a meaning, but it could be done easier or better with another material they avoid. So that's important for us in this project to check the different local raw materials without having or trying not to be so biased in our opinions of, okay, this shouldn't be good to perforate a ceramic vessel or to use because in our idea it wasn't good. And this also involved the interaction of different technologies, because to create a ceramic vessel, people had to go and find the clay, cook it, find water, find like the trees, so many things, and this involves so many technologies, and so that's why we work with the tools too. Okay, so in our methodology we work with experimental archaeology, so in stage 1 we did the experimental design, and in stage 2 we work with the archaeological collection from El Espinillo site. This is where the archaeological site is. It's in the Lower Paraná wetland in Argentina, so this is northeastern Argentina. As you can see, that tiny square. And in that picture I show kind of the landscape, how it is. It's like a wetland, so rivers, grassland, there are trees, and the trees sometimes have spines. So that's for you to see. And the main aspects of the archaeological sites of the area are that they were hunter-gatherers. I kind of talked about this yesterday, but now I'm showing it differently. They had a low mobility and stability that was associated to the wetland because they had so many resources there, so they didn't move much. They fished, and we have like evidence of in the archaeofaunal collection of siluriformes and carassiformes. They hunted terrestrial fauna like copu, wild guinea pig, pampas deer, and marsh deer. They gathered mollusks. They exploited vegetables like the how is it in English? Pindo palm. And well, they used the bone instruments and artifacts I showed yesterday. They have a scarcity of lithic raw material that came from other places, so we see mainly those little projectile points, but some expedient tools as well. We see the tembetas and the ornaments made with shell, and also the pottery that was used to cook, to transport, and to for storage. And they are mainly like open profiles with simple outlines, so it's not that they were really complex vessels, but in some cases a really few amount of the ceramic we found are called the tubular forms or zoomorphic forms. So they created this kind of animal-shaped forms in some vessels, but they weren't for regular use, and it's not clear their use. Okay, so the experimental design was guided by this question, which is what objects artisans of the past might have used in the Lower Paraná wetland. And so we collected at first these objects. We collected those tree like branches or sticks that I collected at the Cielo de los Pantanos National Park and the Reserva in San Miguel, kind of near at my house, and it has local species. Then we have that spine from an armado. That is from a collection, a comparative collection at the museum I work at. And then the other fish spines, the small ones, are from those fish I had to process that were gathered in the area too. And then the last one is an incisive of a coipus. Okay, so in the experiment, we asked for inexperienced individuals, both male and female, to do the perforations. They were between 20 and 40 years old, and we asked them to use all the tools by doing different actions. What I call 360 perforation is like doing this all the time, and then 180 degrees would be like going back and forth. So like to see if we saw differences not only in the ceramic, but also in their perceptions, because for me it was important to see like if they could, since they were inexperienced, if they could see differences in the raw materials and also in handling them, in using them. What were their observations and why inexperience? And this is something people ask, because for me, in my biased view, making a hole in a ceramic is so easy. So like for me it could be done, or the question, can it be done by someone that doesn't know anything about ceramics? It was to try. Okay, so the results. In the case of the very soft state, we saw that the vessel was really unstable, it deformed easily, and this made it really hard to handle it, and also to kind of make the perforations because it was really sticky and lots of burrs were made. But they could make a perforation, but it was really messy. Then in the soft state, it was more stable, easier to handle, and burrs still formed, but they were less sticky, so it was easier to remove them and to clean them. And also, all the tools were or could be used to make the holes at this state. Then, in the leather state, this was, in this case, it was dry enough, so it didn't, or it wasn't deformed, but and the tools didn't stick. Then burrs were easier to remove, and this saved a lot of time, because in the other cases they had to remove them and clean them, and that took a lot of time, but here it was easier and faster. And then the wooden sticks were less effective because it was like kind of harder to penetrate. Then in the dry state, more pressure was needed, so the fish wound had to be used at 360, but then wooden stick wouldn't work in that kind of perforation, and only in the 180 degrees perforation technique. Then, in the case of the artisan perception, all of them preferred making the perforation from the outer surface, so from like the outside. And then they preferred to handle the wooden sticks because it was kind of uncomfortable because of the shape or the size, the spines. And so maybe they probably had to cut them, or in the case of the spines, so it wouldn't like hurt the hand or wasn't uncomfortable. Then we saw in the experimental vessels that burrs usually appear on the opposite side of where the tool was applied. So like if they were making the perforation from outside, the burrs and all the clay that came from the other side, so like in the internal side of the vessel. And then that each tool leaves distinct marks and burrs. Here, I will show that in the other one too. So here we can see the differences. This is also in the soft state. The first one, A, is wood, then B is with the big spine of an armado, then C was with the, I'm sorry, I'm confused, with the coipus incisive, and D was with the other spines. Oh no, I'm sorry, the B was with the small spines and the D with the big spines. Sorry, I read that wrong. So each one was different, but in all of them we could see that the cross-section of the perforation was tubular. And that was very different in the dry state. So in the dry state we used the bone and wood, and in all of them we could see this conical morphology in the cross-section. So really different. Okay, so now we analyze the El Espinillo site, and we see if the fragments were body or rim fragments. Then why this? Because if it was a body or like the border of the vessel, we thought that it might be related to the function. If it was for knotting, suspension, or mending holes, we thought that if it was mending, maybe we could find that it was in the body, or we could find different ones. But then if they were near the upper part of the ceramic vessel, we thought that it could be for suspension, for example. Then we consider whole, fragmented, and marked holes. I will show pictures of the marked holes later. We check the shear thickness and the hole diameter, and in the case of the morphology of the hole or the perforation, we saw the cross-section, so if they were tubular, conical, or biconical, and the source of movement. So like if it was conical, like if it came from the external or internal surface. We also analyzed these tools that I told you about yesterday. So these are the polishers that they have the evidence of perforating skin and plants in the tip, and also in the mesial sector they have evidence of smoothing ceramic, skin, and plants. But the thing is, when we analyze, or in fact not we, my advisor analyzed this for her thesis, she didn't have like a wide sample, and then nobody analyzed like the microwear. So like the question was, okay, so maybe they could have used this also to perforate ceramics. It's not that we have evidence, but also the fact that we don't have evidence doesn't make it impossible. So we thought it could be used too. And that's why we consider the bone tools in El Espinillo site. We check the metric structure, the geometry, and the thickness of the apical end. The geometry and metric structure was mainly to think and to compare with the tools, so like the handle, if it was comfortable or not, to think about those things. And then the thickness at the apical end to compare with the size of the perforation, so if it was related. Then our results in the archaeological collections are that we have tubular, we have conical, we have biconical, and we have marked, but most of them are conical and most of them are from the external surface. Here I show the examples we have of the marked holes. So we have these holes that weren't finished, that's why we call them marked holes. They were all at the external surface, but in the case of fragment 8, it was both of external and internal surface. And which was interesting in this fragment was that it wasn't really at the same spot. So maybe we think, okay, like it was so different that maybe that's why they didn't finish the perforation, or maybe they, and in the other cases, they left it that way in case they needed to finish the other side, but they didn't finish or something. Okay, now we also have like these different cases to show. So we have a perforation of top of the creation, and we also have like that fragment with two perforations next to each other, but that doesn't mean it is for mending, because when we see cases worldwide of holes for mending, we see like two fragments separate, and they can be put together, and with the holes are next to each other, so they are thought to be for mending a vessel. But in this case, they were together, so it's like an unknown. Okay, now comparing the results of the experimentation with the archaeological collection, we see that they are conical, and in the case of the experimentation, we see like that aureole area around the perforation too, not only in the cross section we see it conical, but also in the surface where the movement came. It has this aureole around it that was removed with the tool, and we see like this aureole area too in the ceramic, in the perforations in the archaeological collection. The pictures aren't gray. I've been in Brazil for so long and I'm not at the lab, and we had like some trouble, so I don't know if you can see it, but like they are with the arrows, I'm kind of pointing at it. And also in the case of the one that has the decoration and the perforation is up on top, because of how the decoration looks and the moment it is done, so it's not sticky and it has not like a high quantity of burrs. We think that the perforation was made like not at the first steps of the process of the ceramic production. And then we compared also the diameter of the holes, both in the archaeological collection and in the experimentation, and also the thickness at the apical end of the experimental tools and the archaeological tools. And we see that they are somehow similar because they are from 1 or 2 millimeters to 9 or 6 millimeters, because of course the size of the tool will impact in the size of the perforation. So in the future, what we would like to do is to continue this experimentation by using lithic and malacological tools that we didn't use here, local clays, perforate cooked vessels, and then see the traces of use of the experimental tools and the perforated vessels, and continue with the analysis of archaeological collections. And here I have to make like to go back again to the analysis, or when I told you somehow how are the archaeological sites is, why didn't we use here or lithic or malacological tools? Because we don't have many lithics, so what our first thought was they won't be using points, or maybe they were. We would like to see that in the future. But since we only have points, our first thought was they wouldn't be using the points to perforate a ceramic vessel. But who knows? These are the references. Thank you very much for listening, and well, again, thank you for the organizers for the event, and thank you to my university in Brazil who is paying my trip in Curitiba.
Thank you very much, Lucia. So now we will move on to our next presentation, which is from Claudia Inés Parellada. I've probably mispronounced that, Claudia, sorry. Who will be talking about carimbos arqueológicos. Yes. And the talk will be in Portuguese, so if you need headphones, please make sure to put them on.
Eu sou arqueóloga do Museu Paranaense e professora do programa de pós-graduação em Antropologia e Arqueologia
courses
da
in archaeology
Universidade
from the
Federal.
Federal University of Paraná. So I am going to talk about archaeological stamps, experimentations in ceramics, textiles, and rocks. Here we have my contact information. So these studies had the purpose of expanding discussions about the use of stamps in archaeological and ethnographic contexts in South America, providing different raw materials and the multiple possibilities in several supports. So these stamps, that they can be in wood or bone or pieces of plants, seeds, fruit, and in ceramics and pottery, in addition to other raw materials, they are found in different parts of the world from ancient populations. And here in South America, there are several works. There's a focus of these types of ceramic stamps in the Andes, and here in the plains to the east of South America, we have these archaeological ceramic stamps that have already been documented, and they're still used by different indigenous peoples in Brazil and also in South America. And here on the slide at the bottom, you can see some of these ceramic roller stamps that are documented in the area of the former Guarani Jesuit mission San Pablo del Inaí that we had here in the state of Paraná, in the south of Brazil, between 1627 and 1629. To be able to understand the stamps, their functionality and connections, and also their symbolic aspects, we have to think about the linguistic and ethnic diversity in these spaces that we are talking about, and think that these stamps, even within a certain group and in a certain time period, there are changes. For example, in those that used roller stamps, they also used comb stamps, as you can see here on the slide, to put red ink on the ceramics. So this was on this Guarani Jesuit mission that I mentioned at the start of the 17th century. The methodology of the work is based on extensive biographic, image, and 3D analysis, both in technical reserves and in exhibition areas, such as, and especially, the collections of the Paranaense Museum, the Federal University of Paraná, among other institutional collections. So that's how we created the digital database that summarizes cultural aspects, archaeometric, morphological, and symbolic aspects. Each stamp is also associated with a range of possibilities of pigments and fixing materials for the ink. So it's always important to have this survey done so that we are able to test and do a little experimentation to analyze the process and this impression and the motifs as well, which can be circles, lines, or even geometric patterns composed of triangles and polygons. From the multivariate analysis of these stamps, we selected a few types, and we experimented on them with replica, and the use of varied pigments and fixatives on clay, ceramics, textiles, skin, bones, and supports and rocks and minerals. We got them all together, and we thought they could be used in different times and by a variety of people. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that we made this black pigment by grinding coal using a tool, a beater, and an anvil. And we know from literature and archaeometric analysis that black pigments, for instance, they can have different origins, both organic and inorganic, just like manganese oxide. In this analysis, we tried to observe and document through images and textual narratives these diagnostic characteristics of each type of stamp, the technologies involved, and possible pigments and associated compounds. Here on this slide, you have an illustration taken from an article by ethnologist Herbert Baldus, who was from the state of São Paulo, and he presented 2 stamps, Kaiwa Guarani, which were documented and taken to be incorporated into institutional collections in the middle of the 20th century. And Baldus, when he wrote this article, richly illustrated, he classified the Brazilian ethnographic stamps that he looked for national and international institutions. He classified them into 7 types, and those types are rod or the like, which are more circular but can also be used for stains and sometimes angular lines. The wide flat stamp, which is used to make an impression, and that can be on a flat surface or also on a convex plane. This morphology that's going to be applied to the stamp on a fork in a roll, which is cylindrical, and that can be made by using the finger or also a small stick to make that rolling. And from the fruit of the babaçu palm that use negative or positive seeds, and also in gourd, which is cut in half, and it makes a circular impression, or a rope. And in the lower figure, you can see a bifacial stamp related to the Tupinambá people in Bahia State. Margarete Souza, also in 2005, wrote an article that tries to discuss archaeological stamps from the state of Goiás, the center west of the country, and she also tries to classify them into types, different from those listed by Baldus in 1962. And in the upper figure, we have a few of those types. We have the impressions by means of these roller stamps, and below here we have an archaeological ceramic stamp related with the Uru archaeological tradition, with a dating close to 700 years before present time. And we were thinking about this data survey because we have a lot of varieties and models. And here on the slide you can see a plain stamp on wood, the acajá, used for facial and body painting by the indigenous people in Cubana, who belong with the Yanomami indigenous land, and they have a language from the Carib linguistic family. This group has 3 ways of making body paint. First, they use it with a finger and then a very thin splint, and then this stamp. There are specificities in which stamp is going to be used according to the moment, the ritual, also according to gender, age group. And usually, these people use organic pigments like urucum, anato for red ink, and for black ink, they use ground tree bark and vine leaves. Thinking of South America, there's a large volume of these stamps. So thinking about ceramic roller stamps, there are more than 2,000 stamps documented for the Jamacoyaqui culture from Ecuador, and they were documented here by Carolina Segre, and that shows that several of them were rolled with their fingers, some with sticks. And other stamps, plants, for example, those from Mantenha Moçambique, which was a population that lived in this time. It's actually people who lived between 850 and 1600 years after Christ, so they had a contact with the conquistadors, and they had contact with them, and they used a range of flat stamps in addition to roller stamps. And here you have a ceramic stamp, which is rectangular, with an impression of a goddess, a woman, who was identified by researchers in Ecuador. And in that, we can intertwine this with sacred aspects, symbolic aspects, that stamps, which graphically synthesizes a motif, they can have this connection, and they can be connected to myths of origin or clan, different people in time. Here, trying to think about stamps that have already been documented in the south of Brazil, we can think of native people with two indigenous people with long-lasting histories. Currently, we have two linguistic families, G, represented by Kayang Kwanleng, and also the Tupi-Guarani language, which are the Karani Ningwa, Kayandewa, Kawa, and Sheta. And so this mission, so we had this document of several representations of this group at this time, and we had 6 stamps. And here you have an impression in design. We didn't use that experimentally. We didn't use the original stamps. We had other patterns, repeating the same pattern, but also with others, to think about other groups, for example, the Congolese people, who traditionally produced ceramic that could be printed with textile messages or with flat stamps or rolls. So here, going back to the Guarani mission, this is São Paulo del Inaí from the 17th century, but it's a pattern with a drawing design. We didn't use this to do the original. So this is another stamp. And here we produced even the flaws that we could have in certain parts of the stamp. And here we have a replica of the stamps. As I said, we made 15 of those stamps. And these other ones were made trying to think of types and geometric motifs that could be found in some vessels and materials. Of course, we might think that these stamps need a surface that is more plastic. So the best results are on skin, in fabric that's very malleable, or also clay plates, because the stamps are burned and are already ceramic. And we could use several experiments that were done on the clay plate. So this is part of the experiments with pressure and rolling. sometimes using pigments, for example, red, and also anato, as well as checkered powder, and also charcoal and other pigments using animal fat, pork fat, especially to fix the pigment in the experiment, especially done on paper or a more fine fabric to better fix. Animal fat works quite well. And here, with charcoal, it appears on the negative side of the stamp, and it shows on the print as well in the rolling. So these pigments are being developed using for other possibilities and variability as well. Another one that has a pigment of urucum and charcoal, trying to show the differences for the negative and the positive. And always associating these moments. Many times they are related in certain activities. So part of this process, of course, repetition doesn't exist. Only the process, the technological process, and it's all within a context. The use of these stamps was in a group. So more than one person could be putting pressure to use this. And that could be done in many different ways. So in these results, so it's important to have contextual analysis. So many times we have this documentation of pipes, and many times this rounded mouth of pipes can serve as a stamp for making and marking the skin, like these Carajá people here from the central western part of Brazil, or the Kengang people in the 1950 or 1940. They report the use of bamboo stalks to make the circular clamp mark on the face. So this is just part of this work. Part of that done in the Paranense Museum and together with the Federal University of Paraná. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. And now we have our final presentation by Felix. Oh, it's up there. Felix Adrian Tencanriu and his team, which will be looking at bridging past and present experimental archaeology meets public engagement.
Over the past decade, our research team has been engaged in a series of experimental archaeology projects aimed at reconstructing and dating Neolithic ceramic kilns inspired by the Cucuten Tripila culture. These experiments have provided valuable insights into the construction techniques, firing efficiency, and operational challenge of prehistoric kilns. Our efforts have led to the successful reconstructions and dating of the 3 outdoor kilns, each refining our understanding of ceramic technology in the late Neolithic period. More recently, this accumulated knowledge has been applied to the construction of a full-scale museum kiln at the History Museum of Piatra Neamț, an indoor installation designed to bring our experimental findings to a wider audience. The present discussion focuses on the interactive process of building and using these kilns, drawing upon 3 major experimental projects and subsequent laboratory analyses that allowed us to determine firing temperatures and assess ceramic properties post-experimentations. Additionally, We will explore how these experiments culminated in the creation of the museum kiln, which now serves as a tangible bridge between academic research and public engagement, offering visitors a direct experience of Neolithic ceramic production techniques. The project began with the reconstruction of a late Cucuteni two-chamber updraft kiln discovered at Stolnice, Republic of Moldova. The archaeological find, exceptionally well preserved and meticulously documented, served as a crucial reference for understanding prehistoric firing technology. In September 27, a team of archaeologists undertook a full-scale reconstruction near the discovery site, closely following the original design and dimensions. The kiln layout featured a lower fire chamber built with two combustion channels and an upper chamber where the pottery was placed. Authentic materials were prioritized, local clay, water, and tempering fibers like chaff, where willow branches were used to form the dome structure. The excavation of the firing area and stocking pit was carefully conducted, followed by the construction of clay walls. The clay for the structure was prepared by mixing it with the straw to enhance cohesion and the thermal resistance. One of the major challenges encountered was the dome constructions. Archaeological evidence provided only limited information on how the origin kiln's wall was shaped. Based on similar structures and ethnographic analysis, a wattle dome with a top vent was hypothesized. Willow roots were woven into a cradle, and the carb mixture of clay and chaff was gradually applied, were it to form a thick head retaining roof. The kiln was left to dry naturally for 2 days, aided by small kindling fires lit inside to accelerate the hardening process. The first experimental firing lasted over 10 hours, with a gradual increase in temperature to prevent thermal shock. Observers noted efficient heat circulation within the kiln, ensuring even exposure of the pottery to the flames. However, while the structure performed well, the maximum temperature reached only around 700 degrees Celsius, lower than anticipated. Laboratory analyses conducted on the fire ceramics, including X-ray diffraction and scanning electron microscopy, confirmed incomplete vitrification, suggesting that the adjustments were needed in kiln ventilation and fuel management. One key issue identified was the excessive width of the top opening, which allowed heat to escape instead of being retained. Additionally, the kiln's underloading may have prevented heat from building efficiently. Despite these setbacks, the experiment successfully demonstrated the general viability of the Cucuteni kiln design, while highlighting areas for refinement. Building on the Stolnice trial, a second kiln was constructed at the Boychan Research Base in 2020 to test modifications made at improving firing efficiency. The primary innovation was the addition of small vent holes positioned around the fire channels. As observed in some archaeology examples, researchers hypothesized that these openings would enhance airflow and promote a more uniform heat distribution. The kiln structure was similar to the first, but with a crucial adjustment. A wooden frame was used to support the dome, which was then covered in layers of clay. Additionally, the kiln was fired to full capacity with ceramic vessels, ensuring optimal heat absorption. This firing produces significantly better results, reaching temperatures of 850 to 900 degrees Celsius across most of the chamber. The modified airflow system operated to create a more efficient combustion process, allowed for higher and more consistent temperatures. Post-experimental analysis confirmed that the higher temperatures were achieved across a wider range of the kiln interior. For transformed infrared spectroscopy revealed that kaolin and fully transformed into moonlight, a sign of advanced sintering. Additionally, thermal gravimetric analysis indicated a complete burnout of organic materials, suggesting an improved combustion process. These findings demonstrated that the kiln structural adaptation had a measurable impact on performance. The success of this firing reinforced the importance of kiln ventilation in prehistoric ceramic production. The results confirmed that Cucutanean potters were actively experimenting with the design features to optimize heat efficiency, providing a compelling example of ancient technological ingenuity. However, research still sought to push firing temperatures by 900 degrees Celsius, prompting the planning of a third experiment. The final experiment in 2022 introduced two major refinements, replacing the wattle and daub dome with a daub brick structure and using high calorific hardware fuel. These changes were designed to enhance heat retention and ensure steady fuel supply for sustained high temperatures. The firing process proceeded smoothly, achieving an immersive uniformity in temperature distributions. By the end of the session, internal temperatures reached 850 to 900 degrees Celsius throughout the kiln chamber, producing fully vitrified ceramics. The improved design resulted in stronger, more durable pottery, closely matching archaeological specimens. These repeated experiments, presented at various conferences and published in academic journals, have contributed to our team's growing recognition within the Romanian archaeological community. As a result, in 2023 we received an official request from the History Museum of Piatra Neamț to construct a ceramic firing kiln inside the buildings, within one of the exhibition halls dedicated to the Chalcolithic Cucutanean culture. At the time, the museum was undergoing renovation, providing an opportunity to integrate these installations into the redesigned exhibition space. We agreed to the project under the condition that the kiln would be built using authentic materials, clay, wood, straw, and water, and full-scale dimensions, rather than being a scaled-down replica or a poorly decorative installation made from artificial materials. The next step involved drafting a detailed project proposal, including various sketches of the kiln and inventory of required materials, estimated construction phases, and other logistical considerations. Our initial plan was to create a wooden framework that would be filled with remade clay, replicating the solid earthen foundation of the ancient kilns. Within this structure, we intended to carve out or preserve the underground elements of the kiln, such as the fire channels, the fuel feeding opening, and the stoker's pit, and then constructed the vaulted dome above it. The museum administration approved all proposals, but the execution of the project was delayed by a year until September 2024 due to extended renovations work. However, our preparations began earlier. During the summer, at our archaeological research base, we reshaped, painted, and fired the ceramic vessels that would be displayed inside the kiln. For the firing process, we used the same kiln built in 2022, requiring only a thorough cleaning and the reconstructions of the upper part of the dome after placing the vessels inside. Additionally, based on our initial calculations, we prepared the wheel of framework on which the kiln's dome will be built along with the various accessories that will be displayed alongside the kiln, illustrating prehistoric pottery making techniques. These additions included a rotating modeling device used for shaping large vessels with a partially finished pot demonstrating the coil building technique, wooden stone tools used for shaping, smoothing, and burnishing ceramics, small vessels containing prepared pigments for painting, and brushes with clay or wooden handles made from animal hair and plant fibers. These elements aim to create a dynamic and immersive exhibit showcasing the tools and the techniques employed by Neolithic potters. The construction of the museum kiln took 2 weeks, but certain adjustments and exceptions had to be made to our self-imposed rule of using only prehistoric materials. The high humidity inside the museum, combined with the cold and the damp weather outside, forced us to abandon our initial plan of using a formwork file with the wet clay to stimulate the ground surface. Instead, we opted for a platform made of reclaimed bricks from a demolished structure. These bricks were bonded with clay and covered with an additional clay layer to maintain an authentic appearance. Another significant change was the abandonment of the willow framework initially intended for the kiln's dome. The architect in charge of the exhibition's layout relocated the kiln from its plane central position to a corner between two walls. This shift made it impossible to construct the dome from the outside, as would have been standard practice in prehistoric conditions. As a result, we had to adapt our construction method to the constraints of the indoor space. A further challenge was the quality of the clay provided by the museum, which contained an excessive amount of sand, making it difficult to mold and structurally unstable. This required use to conduct field research around the city to locate a suitable clay source, securing over a ton of material necessary for the kiln's construction. As the dome constructions progressed, we also had to integrate LED lights with the flame effects inside the fire channels and the ceramic chamber, along with placing our experimental ceramic vessel inside the kiln. This step, originally planned for after the dome's completion, became necessary midway through the construction since the closed dome would have made such installation impossible. To enhance the kiln's realism, we applied mineral pigments to its surface, drawing on our outdoor firing experience to recreate the appearance of an active kiln in the midst of firings. In the stocking pit, we arranged a reconstructed rotating modeling device, presumed to have been used in a prehistory, with a partially shaped vessel demonstrating the coiling technique. Nearby, we placed prepared clay for vessels modeling, along with small containers of mineral oxides used for painting ceramics. The entire installation, completed by a short film looping NERPy, features archaeological footage of Q10 kilns from excavations and the scenes from our experimental firing. The goal is to offer visitors, regardless of their level of prior knowledge, a comprehensive and visually engaging insight into the chain operator of Q10 ceramic production. Through this setup, we aim to bridge academic research and public understanding, making the intricate process of Rhenolithic pottery making accessible and immersive for all audience. Beyond its experimental value, it is kiln served as a prototype for an indoor exhibit at History Museum of Piatra Neamț. The museum kiln was designed to replicate the successful 2022 model, ensuring visitors can now see a life-size Q10 kiln, authentic in its structural features, configured as it would have functioned, providing an interactive educational experience. This installation bridged academic research with public engagement, allowing museum goers to explore the complexities of prehistoric ceramic production. The impact of this experimental archaeology project reached beyond academia and facing public engagement with prehistoric technologies. The kiln constructions and fire involved the students, museum visitors, and the community. The museum kiln at Piatra Neamț offers visitors a first-hand look at ancient pottery making with interactive features like stimulated firing and educational panels. By integrating real experimental data, the exhibit provides an immersive learning experience. The project also helped train the young archaeologists through hands-on participations in kiln constructions, fire, and ceramic analysis. Through public events and museum displays, it has made Neolithic ceramic technology more accessible and engaging to a wider audience. The experimental kiln reconstructions in the project have greatly advanced the understanding of Q10 tripilar ceramic firing, its iterations refining aspects like airflow and the fuel efficiency, culminating in a museum installation that brings prehistoric pottery making to life. By blending scientific research with public engagement, this project bridges academia and cultural heritage education. The kiln do more than confirm historical theories. They spark curiosity and appreciation for ancient craftsmanship, making this knowledge accessible beyond the scholars. The reconstructed kiln at the History Museum of Piatra Neamț exemplifies this approach, turning research into an interactive experience that depends the public's connections to the past.
Okay, so now we have the final question and answer session for our speakers, and I think Claudia and Adina here. Yay, hello. Can you hear me, Adina? And Claudia? Perfect. Excellent. So does anyone have any questions for our speakers? We, of course, have some. Our online participants are very keen. They're sending in lots of questions. Claudia, we have a question for you. Feel free to respond in Portuguese. Would you prefer the question in Portuguese? Or I can give it to this one here.
Oi, Cláudia. Aqui no chat perguntaram.
On the chat, they asked if you think these stamps made from other materials like rocks, bones, or wood, if you found them. You're asking if I found archaeology stamps? Yeah, that is the question. If there are stamps made from other materials, I don't know. Right, so there are I am going to answer faster in Portuguese, and then Matilda, if you can translate, so that I'm not speaking too slowly. Yes, there are stamps in bone and wood, but it depends on the preservation of the archaeological site. For example, okay.
Translation team are taking care, and I've just realized I'm still listening to them, so I'm hearing the Portuguese in my head. Thank you, Claudia. We also have a question for Lucia, if you want to shuffle your way towards the edge. Did you also note the technique that was used to push through the clay? So with the wrist, with the shoulder, from below, from above?
Okay, so they were all... oh, yep, sorry. No, they were in the vessels, they were all doing like this way, like so, no, not moving it like just that way. I don't know if that's clear enough, like me showing.
Would there be, I guess, a future one where you would try different ones, like if they have it, I don't know, with the pot on its sides and going from the top, or pushing from, I don't know what different ones would you think, would you conduct more experiments with different techniques?
I haven't thought about that, but like, yeah, of course, it's a good idea. So thank you for the comment.
Always good to have more experiments to do, right? It gives us more work. We also have a question for Adina. So the original question asked, will there be reenactors doing live demonstrations? I guess because it's in a museum, probably not live firings. But is the plan to have, I guess, some kind of live persona there, or will there be demonstrations conducted outside maybe? Is that a plan for the future?
Given that the installation is set up inside a museum, it will be static. However, at the research base, there have been and will continue to be live demonstrations of fire and ceramic kilns.
Excellent, good. So giving professional ceramic artists a job as well, which is good. Any other questions for our speakers from here? Let me check if there's any more coming in online. I don't think so. It's the final session. I think that's understandable. We've all been a long 3 days. Great. Well, in that case, I'll say thank you so much to our speakers for the final session. And we will move on to the closing, for which I will invite Professor João Carlos Miranda de Souza up to the stage.
Thank you, Matilda. Bom, chegamos ao final
We've come to the end
nosso evento aqui
of this
local.
event here in our Federal University of Paraná. Starting tomorrow, the event is going to continue only with the participation of those in loco. Unfortunately, those of you online won't be able to participate in our excursion. So before anything else, I'd like to just give you a final word about our travel tomorrow. Elo is going to remind me of that. Would you like to say that? Yeah. Hi, everyone. We will leave tomorrow at 8 a.m., but I'll send an email to everyone who registered. And yeah, it's all right. Just please confirm to me by email the days that you are going to be with us. It's Thursday and Friday, and yeah, that's it. 8 a.m. here in front of the door over there. We're going to have a bus waiting for you. Tomorrow we're going to go to Paranaguá. First of all, Antonina, then Paranaguá on the coast. And then on Friday, we will travel to Ponta Grossa to visit the sites there. Very well. I'd also like to reinforce the message that Matilda gave us on the first day in the opening ceremony about EAC, which is a society for those interested in experimental archaeology. And so, Matilda, você gostaria de falar um pouquinho mais a respeito da EAC e da importância de ser membro? Sim, entrem para a EAC. Então, a EAC tem a ideia de que ela
society, so especially for Brazilian participants, it's very cheap, I think, membership, considering it is an academic society. And we run on the idea that all information and research should be open access. There should be good communication internationally between different experimental archaeologists, professional craftspeople, people working in heritage associations or heritage interpretation. So basically, the EXART becomes stronger the more people join and the more people can contribute to the network. So we always really strongly encourage people to join. And yeah, we're a friendly bunch, I think. we are nice. And if you are still thinking about it and want to check it out a little bit, the Discord, which I mentioned at the first day as well, you can find how to join that on the website. All of our EXARC members nearly are on there, but we also have it open to non-EXARC members still at the moment. So there's lots of discussions going on there. So yes, do go and check that out if you're interested in finding out more.
E como membro brasileiro da EXARC,
as a Brazilian member of EXARC and also of the board of EXARC, I've been that for a few months now. I strongly recommend that Brazilian colleagues and South American colleagues also join EXARC. It's really very cheap for us. I just pay like 80 reais a year, so for our scientific society that's nothing, even for us who do not earn much compared to other people. And the benefits are many, you know, for a society that's very much involved and likes to interact. All the members like to interact with one another, and we learn a lot from each other and everybody's experiences. So what else? Oh, for those who presented papers here, a special issue with the manuscripts and the final results of your work will be published. Of course, that it's not an obligation from you, but if you're interested, we're going to come up with a special edition, and the details about this publication are going to be sent to you soon. And, you know, deadlines, rules, and all of that is going to be sent to you very soon. Having said that, we would also like to say a few thank yous. So first of all, to the volunteers of EXARC who organized all this so well with online presentations and the videos that were pre-recorded with the subtitles and all of that. So thank you so much to the volunteers, to the moderators who, you know, try to be sure that everything was working, everything so well during our transmissions, and they also helped us they helped people watch the presentations online and helped answering questions and all that. Also, I reinforce the things that I gave at the start of the event to the researchers and the SAPA students, and also from the PPGA who participated intensely in the organization and the logistics of this event, making huge effort to make everything happen. To the people from the TV team, UFPR TV, who are up there, thank you so much, guys, for everything that you've been doing, for kindly doing this work with audio and video, this technical work that enables online transmission as well and streaming. To the excellent work of our interpreters back there, thank you so much. A special thanks to Paulo. What's his surname? Paulo, I don't remember his surname, but Paulo, who's from the management of PPGR, right? The secretariat of PPGR, because I mean, he literally can move mountains for our trip to take place. So thank him so much. I, of course, have to thank CNBQ, of course, and CAPES, who funded the event. It was not just one federal agency, actually two federal agencies enabled this conference to take place. And finally, a huge thanks to everyone who came to Curitiba from several places of Brazil, several places from the world, to be at this conference and to show that Brazil is always is also working with experimental archaeology. And from now on, we are going to come up with even more research, and we will put Brazil as a larger part of the map, working with experimental archaeology. Também eu preciso dizer
this event would not even be taking place at all, because it is Juca that first suggested it, that made sure it happened, that kept it all going. So without him, it wouldn't be here either. So also thanks to Juca.
Muito obrigado, Matilda.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Because also, if it weren't for her, our doctor, the director, Exarch, we could not be here. So lastly, I hope to see you all at the next conference of experimental archaeology in our 15th edition. That was still... Okay, so it's actually confirmed. So we do have our next edition. It's going to be in Romania. And maybe the next edition is, I don't know, maybe in some other country in Latin America, Argentina, some other place of the world, I don't know. And reminding you all that Exarch is always available for those institutions that offer to host the event for the next editions of the conference. And for those who are here in person, I hope to see you not only in the next conference, but also tomorrow, right? Here before 8 o'clock, because at 8 we will all have to be inside the bus to actually leave for our trip. So we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much once again. Muito obrigada novamente.